The sound of an AK-47 firing is unmistakable, a rapid, deafening roar that signals immediate, lethal danger. But what happens to the human body and mind when a routine traffic stop erupts into a war zone? Imagine the sheer volume of adrenaline surging through a police officer's veins when a high-speed chase ends not with a surrender, but with a suspect stepping out of a vehicle and opening fire with a military-grade rifle. Today, we are going to dissect the incredible physiological, psychological, and medical realities behind the shocking Georgia high-speed chase and subsequent shootout. As a health and human performance expert, I want to take you beyond the viral dashcam footage and explore what actually happens to the human nervous system, the brain, and the body under the extreme stress of a deadly active shooter situation. We often look at these events through the lens of criminal justice or nightly news entertainment, but the biological reality of surviving a high-speed pursuit followed by an ambush is a masterclass in human survival mechanisms, acute stress responses, and the profound medical consequences of high-velocity trauma. When a driver decides to flee the police at speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour, their body is already operating at an extreme cognitive and physiological deficit, driven by a profound fight-or-flight response that completely alters decision-making, peripheral vision, and motor control. This initial state of hyper-arousal is only the baseline. The moment that suspect stops the vehicle, grabs an AK-47, and begins discharging rounds at law enforcement, the environment transforms into an arena of maximum human stress where split-second biological reactions dictate who lives and who dies. To truly understand the gravity of this Georgia incident, we must first analyze the physiological cascade that occurs during the high-speed chase itself, long before the first gunshot is ever fired. When an individual decides to flee law enforcement, the brain's threat assessment center, known as the amygdala, instantly registers the flashing blue lights and sirens not just as a legal threat, but as an existential danger to their freedom and safety. This triggers an immediate activation of the sympathetic nervous system, often referred to as the fight-or-flight mechanism, which floods the bloodstream with a massive surge of catecholamines, primarily adrenaline and noradrenaline. Within milliseconds, the heart rate skyrockets, often bypassing normal aerobic thresholds and reaching levels upwards of 180 or even 200 beats per minute. At this elevated heart rate, the human body undergoes a radical transformation. Blood vessels in the skin and gastrointestinal tract constrict, shunting oxygen-rich blood away from non-essential organs and directing it toward the major muscle groups, such as the quadriceps and biceps, preparing the body for explosive physical exertion. However, this massive redirection of resources comes at a severe cognitive cost, particularly to the prefrontal cortex, which is the area of the brain responsible for logical reasoning, future planning, impulse control, and nuanced decision-making. As the prefrontal cortex loses its dominant role, the brain reverts to more primitive, instinctual survival behaviors driven by the hindbrain and limbic system, which explains why fleeing suspects often make incredibly reckless, irrational decisions during a pursuit, such as driving into oncoming traffic or navigating blind curves at lethal speeds. While the suspect is experiencing this profound neurological hijack, the pursuing officers are undergoing an equally intense, though highly trained, physiological response. Police officers are professionals, but they are still biological entities subject to the laws of human anatomy, and a high-speed chase requires an extraordinary level of cognitive processing under extreme stress. As the pursuit intensifies, officers experience a phenomenon known as tunnel vision, or peripheral narrowing, where the visual field constricts by up to 70%, forcing the individual to focus exclusively on the immediate threat or target directly in front of them while completely losing awareness of their surroundings. This visual deterioration is accompanied by auditory exclusion, a psychological anomaly where the brain actively blocks out external sounds, such as the roaring of their own engine, the screeching of tires, or even the blare of their own siren, in order to conserve cognitive bandwidth for the most critical sensory inputs. Furthermore, the loss of fine motor skills becomes a critical factor. At heart rates exceeding 145 beats per minute, the small muscles in the fingers and hands lose precision, making complex tasks like manipulating a radio, steering a vehicle at high speeds, or later, drawing a service weapon, exceptionally difficult. This is why law enforcement training emphasizes gross motor skills, which rely on larger muscle groups and remain functional even under the influence of extreme adrenaline. When the high-speed pursuit finally comes to a halt, the sudden transition from a high-velocity vehicular chase to a stationary, lethal confrontation represents one of the most volatile and dangerous moments in human interaction. In the Georgia incident, the suspect did not merely attempt to run on foot. He exited the vehicle armed with an AK-47, a semi-automatic or fully automatic rifle that fires a 7.62 by 39 mm round, a projectile designed for military combat capable of penetrating standard police body armor and vehicle paneling with ease. The moment an officer perceives this catastrophic escalation, their sympathetic nervous system undergoes a secondary, even more intense spike in activation, pushing their body into a state of hypervigilance that can cause profound distortions in time perception. Many survivors of such close-quarters gunfights report that time seemed to slow down to a crawl, a phenomenon known as tachypsychia, which occurs because the brain is processing sensory information at an unprecedentedly rapid rate, recording every minute detail in an effort to find a pathway to survival. Conversely, some individuals experience memory gaps or time compression, where the entire event seems to flash by in a fraction of a second, leaving them unable to recall the sequence of events accurately until days later when the neurological floodwaters have receded. The introduction of an AK-47 into this scenario introduces an extraordinary level of physical and acoustic trauma to the environment that has direct, immediate health implications for everyone involved. The acoustic report of an AK-47 rifle indoors or in close proximity to a vehicle can easily exceed 150 to 160 decibels, a level of sound pressure that causes immediate, irreversible damage to the delicate hair cells of the cochlea in the inner ear, resulting in instant acoustic trauma, severe tinnitus, and temporary or permanent hearing loss. For an officer under fire, this sudden blast of noise, combined with the visual flash of the muzzle, can cause a brief sensory overload, requiring immense mental discipline to overcome the natural acoustic startle reflex and return fire effectively. Moreover, the ballistic profile of the 7.62 mm round means that any impact on the human body results in devastating cavitation and tissue destruction. Unlike standard handgun rounds, which typically create a permanent cavity equal to the diameter of the bullet, rifle rounds travel at velocities exceeding 2,000 feet per second, creating a massive temporary cavity as the kinetic energy transfers into the surrounding tissues, tearing muscles, shattering bones, and rupturing blood vessels far beyond the actual path of the projectile itself. From a medical and emergency trauma perspective, responding to a casualty who has been shot with a high-velocity rifle during an active engagement requires a highly specialized protocol known as Tactical Combat Casualty Care, or TCCC, which differs significantly from standard civilian first aid. In a traditional medical emergency, responders prioritize the airway and breathing, but in a tactical environment where an active shooter is still deploying an AK-47, the absolute first priority is threat suppression and self-preservation, because you cannot treat a patient if you become a casualty yourself. Once the immediate threat is neutralized or cover is secured, the medical focus shifts instantly to massive hemorrhage control, specifically through the rapid application of a combat application tourniquet to any bleeding extremities. High-velocity rifle wounds to the femoral artery in the thigh or the brachial artery in the arm can cause a human being to bleed to death in as little as 60 to 90 seconds, meaning that the speed of tourniquet application is the single most important factor determining survival. If the gunshot wound is located in a junctional area where a tourniquet cannot be applied, such as the groin or axilla, responders must utilize advanced hemostatic dressings, packing the gauze directly into the wound cavity and applying continuous, heavy pressure for several minutes to promote rapid clot formation. Beyond the immediate external bleeding, wounds to the torso or chest cavity present a unique, life-threatening condition known as a tension pneumothorax, which occurs when a bullet punctures the lung and creates a one-way valve where air can enter the chest cavity during inhalation but cannot escape during exhalation. As air accumulates within the pleural space, it builds up immense pressure, eventually collapsing the injured lung and shifting the entire mediastinum, including the heart and great vessels, toward the opposite side of the chest. This structural shift compresses the vena cava, preventing blood from returning to the heart, leading to a catastrophic drop in blood pressure, profound hypoxia, and ultimately, obstructive shock and cardiac arrest if left untreated. To combat this, tactical medics and trained officers must quickly apply an occlusive chest seal over the open wound to prevent air from entering, and if a tension pneumothorax develops, they must perform a needle decompression, inserting a large bore catheter into the second intercostal space at the mid-clavicular line to release the trapped air and relieve the intrathoracic pressure. While the physical wounds are the most visible and urgent aspect of such a violent event, the neurological and psychological aftermath for the officers involved is an incredibly complex health challenge that begins the moment the scene is secured and can persist for years. In the immediate aftermath of a lethal encounter, the human body experiences a massive neurological crash, often referred to as an adrenaline dump, where the sympathetic nervous system abruptly shuts down and the parasympathetic nervous system takes over in an attempt to restore homeostasis. This sudden shift can cause profound physical exhaustion, uncontrollable shaking or tremors, nausea, vomiting, and a severe cognitive fog, as the brain and muscles are depleted of their primary energy reserves and glucose levels plummet. It is during this critical post-incident window that the foundations for long-term psychological health are laid, and modern law enforcement agencies have increasingly recognized the necessity of immediate, evidence-based mental health interventions to mitigate the development of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. When a human being is subjected to the life-threatening terror of an AK-47 ambush, the intense emotional and sensory experiences are processed through the hippocampus and stored in memory in a highly fragmented, emotionally charged manner. Without proper psychological debriefing and support, these memories can remain improperly integrated, leading to chronic hyperarousal, flashbacks, severe sleep disturbances, and a persistent state of hypervigilance where the individual's brain remains locked in a state of perceived mortal danger even when in a completely safe environment. Neurological imaging of individuals with untreated PTSD reveals structural and functional changes within the brain, including an overactive amygdala that continuously signals threat, a compromised prefrontal cortex that struggles to regulate emotional responses, and a shrunken hippocampus that fails to distinguish between past trauma and present reality. To prevent these chronic alterations, modern critical incident stress management protocols emphasize early peer support, mandatory psychological consultations, and advanced therapeutic modalities such as eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or EMDR, which helps the brain reprocess the traumatic memories into a stable, non-threatening narrative. It is also vital to examine the health and behavioral profile of the suspect who initiates such a devastating sequence of events, as these violent outbursts are rarely isolated incidents and are often the culmination of chronic, unaddressed mental health crises, substance abuse, or severe neurobiological dysfunction. Individuals who engage in high-speed chases and choose to open fire on law enforcement frequently exhibit high rates of antisocial personality disorders, severe impulse control deficits, or are under the acute influence of potent central nervous system stimulants such as methamphetamine or cocaine. These illicit substances profoundly alter brain chemistry, flooding the synaptic clefts with massive quantities of dopamine and norepinephrine, which induces a state of intense euphoria, grandiosity, and paranoia, while completely destroying the individual's capacity to evaluate risk or experience fear in a normal, healthy manner. When a person in a drug-induced psychosis or an extreme manic state is confronted by law enforcement, their perception of reality is completely warped. They may view the police not as authority figures, but as literal monsters or existential threats that must be destroyed at all costs, leading to an absolute disregard for human life, including their own. Furthermore, the public health impact of these high-speed chases extends far beyond the immediate participants, posing an extraordinary danger to innocent bystanders and civilian motorists who happen to be on the roadway during the pursuit. The kinetic energy possessed by a 2-ton motor vehicle traveling at over 100 miles per hour is monumental, and any collision at that velocity results in catastrophic vehicular deformation and extreme deceleration injuries to the human body. When a vehicle abruptly stops during a high-speed crash, the occupant's internal organs continue to move forward at the original speed until they impact the rigid structures of the skeletal system or the interior of the car. This can result in traumatic brain injuries, such as diffuse axonal injury, where the brain shears against the rough interior of the skull, as well as traumatic aortic rupture, a rapidly fatal condition where the sudden deceleration tears the main artery leading from the heart, causing massive, uncontrollable internal bleeding within seconds. By understanding the profound physical, neurological, and public health risks associated with these events, we can better appreciate the immense bravery required by law enforcement officers to bring these chaotic situations to a resolution and the critical importance of robust trauma systems and mental health infrastructure in our society. In conclusion, this harrowing Georgia high-speed chase and subsequent Alaska 47 shootout serves as a stark demonstration of how extreme stress and high-velocity violence can instantly push the human body and mind to their absolute biological limits. We explored the intense sympathetic nervous system hijack that occurs during a pursuit, the devastating ballistic reality of rifle trauma, and the critical medical and psychological interventions required to save lives and heal minds in the aftermath of such chaos. If you found this information valuable, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and let me know in the comments what topic you want to see next.